What happens when a billionaire's wedding turns into the stage for a royal public roast? The sun glistened off the Venetian canals like molten gold the morning Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez were set to marry. Luxury yachts bobbed in rhythm with the waves outside the Aman Hotel, where an ultra-exclusive ceremony was being held, guarded like a presidential summit. For weeks, whispers had swirled around the high society circles about who would be invited and who would be left out. Everyone from Hollywood royalty to global CEOs was in attendance. But no one, not one single person on that coveted list, expected what happened next. Just as the celebration was reaching its emotional crescendo, with Lauren Sánchez preparing to deliver a heartfelt toast, a moment erupted that would send shockwaves through both the entertainment industry and the royal rumor mill. Before we continue, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That moment? Lauren Sánchez stopping mid-sentence, eyes locked on an unexpected figure standing in the crowd, and firing off a verbal jab that left the room in stunned silence before erupting in uneasy laughter. Her words would be echoed across social media for days to come. You weren't on the guest list, Duchess. Try crashing a reality show instead. This wasn't just a celebrity snub. This was a real-time takedown, a high society ambush witnessed by billionaires, celebrities, and power brokers from every corner of the globe. And the target? Meghan Markle, former working royal, Duchess of Sussex. The self-branded philanthropist and Netflix darling who, according to insiders, wasn't supposed to be there. The question isn't just how Meghan Markle found her way into the Bezos-Sanchez wedding without an invitation. The real question is, why? Why would someone of her stature risk such a public embarrassment? What compelled Meghan to walk into a den of exclusivity, hoping no one would question her presence? Was it a misguided PR move? A desperate cry for relevance? Or something more calculated, something even darker? As cameras rolled quietly and celebrity guests whispered nervously, it became painfully clear that something wasn't right. Meghan wasn't seated with any known friends. She wasn't approached by anyone beyond a few awkward glances. And yet, she stood there, poised, smiling, pretending as if she belonged, as if she hadn't just committed one of the most socially suicidal acts in elite celebrity culture, crashing a billionaire's wedding. The scene unfolded slowly at first. Paparazzi weren't allowed inside the venue, but discreet leaks had already begun to trickle out. A blurry photo here, a voice memo there, a now-deleted Instagram story from a high-profile stylist who posted, "Dead." That moment when Lauren shut her down. Within hours, the tabloids were on fire. Duchess Disaster in Venice read one headline. Lauren's Wedding, Meghan's Humiliation read another. But those titles barely scratched the surface of what actually happened inside that ornate Venetian hall. Sources close to the wedding staff revealed that Meghan had arrived solo. No Harry, no entourage. Dressed in a designer ensemble that screamed subtle ambition, she reportedly entered through a side entrance used for caterers and assistants, claiming she was early for a private meeting. By the time the mistake was realized, she had already slipped past security and planted herself near the back of the ceremony area, mingling carefully and avoiding eye contact with those who knew she didn't belong. It was a scene out of a satirical movie, a disgraced duchess in exile, attempting to reclaim a slice of attention she felt entitled to. Except this wasn't fiction. This was real. And as one attendee described it, you could cut the tension with a butter knife. No one knew what to say. Everyone knew what just happened, but we were all too stunned to react. Until Lauren did. Lauren Sánchez, in her new role as Queen of Tech Royalty, did not hold back. She didn't gesture for security. She didn't whisper to an aide. She addressed Meghan directly in front of everyone, with the kind of icy elegance only someone deeply offended could muster. It was the ultimate humiliation, being called out by the bride herself. And not just called out, but roasted with surgical precision. "I didn't see your name on the guest list," Lauren said, holding her champagne flute in one hand and her microphone in the other. "But maybe this is your next Netflix role," the Duchess crashed. The room gasped. Some laughed. A few even clapped nervously, unsure whether to support Lauren or to pretend the moment hadn't happened. Meghan, according to eyewitnesses, stood frozen, then offered a forced smile before glancing around as if looking for an exit. But there was no elegant exit from this mess. Meghan's name was already trending by the time she left the venue. And as the social media storm built to a frenzy, people weren't just asking how she got in, they were asking how far she had fallen. The Meghan Markle of 2018 would never have pulled a stunt like this. That Meghan was on the cover of magazines, praised as a feminist icon, a disruptor of royal traditions. She was supposed to be a bridge between old-world monarchy and modern media. But that image has cracked under the weight of lawsuits, Netflix docuseries, Spotify scandals, and public fallout with both royal family and Hollywood elites. This wasn't just an embarrassing moment. It was symbolic, a public demotion. Meghan, once on the inside, now literally standing outside the inner circle, trying to blend in, only to be reminded she no longer belonged. And perhaps the most chilling part of all? The silence. Not from Meghan, who has always maintained a careful PR strategy, but from those around her. Oprah didn't comment. Gayle King remained quiet. Tyler Perry, her reported protector during the royal exit, said nothing. Her usual defenders, those who once fought her media battles, were nowhere to be found. This time, she was on her own. Was it a calculated risk that backfired? Did Meghan think crashing the most talked-about wedding of the year would reignite her brand? Or had she truly miscalculated the room, believing her presence would be seen as charming or audacious, rather than intrusive and delusional? What's clear is this: Meghan Markle walked into a billionaire's wedding uninvited and walked out a cautionary tale. Not just for royals, but for anyone trying to navigate the unforgiving world of elite Hollywood and global celebrity. The next chapters in this story are filled with complexity: Lauren's strategic rise, Meghan's possible retaliation, Harry's silent reaction, and what this all means for the fractured perception of modern royalty in a world obsessed with exclusivity and spectacle. But to truly understand the scale of this disaster, we need to rewind the clock. We need to dissect every element: how the event was planned, how Meghan infiltrated it, why Lauren took it so personally, and how the aftermath reshaped more than just reputations. This isn't just about a roast. It's about power, social capital, desperation, ego, and one woman who dared to step into a world she was no longer welcomed in, only to be turned into a punchline by the bride of the richest man on earth. And if you think that's where the drama ends, think again. It was the kind of wedding that didn't just make headlines, it reshaped the atmosphere of modern celebrity power. The union of Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez wasn't just about love, it was about legacy, about dominance, about cementing a place in history not just as individuals, but as a couple who had outmaneuvered scandal, defied expectations, and emerged as icons of global influence. For Bezos, it marked the latest chapter in a transformation from tech mogul to cultural monarch. For Sanchez, it was the coronation of a woman who had once lived in the shadows of broadcast journalism, now standing firmly at the center of one of the most opulent and exclusive gatherings of the decade. The setting alone was symbolic. Venice, a city known for its romantic decay, ancient prestige, and architectural splendor. It was a location chosen not just for aesthetic charm, but for its ability to insulate the event from the public eye. In Venice, you don't simply drive up to a hotel. You arrive by water, via private launch, gondola, or yacht. The layered geography of the city, with its narrow alleys, bridges, and sequestered courtyards, offers a kind of natural defense against paparazzi and curiosity seekers. And for this wedding, every alley had been accounted for, every waterway guarded. Security was a masterpiece of logistical planning. Guests received their final itinerary only 48 hours before the ceremony. Their identities were verified through biometric scans upon entry to the private estate. No outside media were permitted within a kilometer radius. Drones were shot down or redirected. Private security details swept boats and balconies for lenses and devices. Attendees had to agree to strict non-disclosure terms. The wedding wasn't just protected, it was fortress-like. And that made Meghan Markle's presence all the more baffling. But before that twist could arrive, the scene was already one of staggering spectacle. The guest list read like a curated selection of the most powerful people alive: Leonardo DiCaprio, Bill Gates, Beyoncé, and Jay-Z. Elon Musk reportedly declined the invitation but sent a diamond-encrusted bottle of tequila as a gift. Tech founders, old money heirs, fashion titans, and political heavyweights formed an ecosystem of global relevance. To be seen at this wedding wasn't simply to attend a celebration. It was to signify that you were still part of the inner circle, the new version of aristocracy ruled not by bloodline, but by power and optics. The venue itself was a restored 16th-century palazzo converted into a hyper-luxury hotel. The interior was draped in ivory silk, with crystal chandeliers transported from Paris, each table set with personalized gold-plated cutlery and arrangements curated by Europe's most renowned floral artist. No detail was left to chance. champagne imported from a private vineyard in France, a four-course dinner designed by Michelin-starred chefs flown in from Tokyo. Even the ambient music was tailored, performed live by an orchestra hidden behind translucent drapery so the visuals wouldn't distract from the performance. Every camera that did make it past security was controlled and curated by a team of professional image consultants. The public would later see only what Jeff and Lauren allowed: soft focus, glowing shots of the couple exchanging vows by candlelight as gondolas floated by in the background. Carefully timed leaks to the press reinforced the image of a powerful but humble couple celebrating love, family, and shared ambition. Lauren Sánchez herself was the undeniable star. Draped in a custom couture gown rumored to have taken over 1,500 hours to embroider by hand, she glided through the event like a woman completely at ease with the moment she was in. Her makeup was subtle but effective, a calculated choice meant to send a message: I belong here. I earned this. She didn't need to play the part of the billionaire's bride, she embodied it. Her journey to this moment was one of transformation. A former news anchor turned helicopter pilot, Lauren had been underestimated for most of her public life. Her relationship with Bezos initially invited ridicule, with whispers that she was a social climber or a gold digger. But those accusations quickly dissolved in the face of Lauren's composure, ambition, and the strategic way she handled the spotlight. Over time, she built not just a romance but a formidable brand, one built on philanthropy, environmental efforts, and, perhaps most importantly, loyalty. She didn't just stand beside Bezos. She helped shape his post-Amazon identity. Their dynamic was palpable. Bezos, usually awkward in front of crowds, was relaxed, even charming. He delivered his speech with moments of humor and emotion, touching on the journey they had taken together, from late-night philosophical debates to shared dreams of building life off Earth. In Lauren, I found not just love, but alignment, he said. We dream in the same direction. It was, by all measures, the kind of celebration that reminded the world who Jeff Bezos really is. A man with limitless resources, but also one who now moves with the flair and theatricality of a studio mogul. Gone was the nerdy founder of Amazon. In his place stood someone who seemed determined to outshine the entire tech elite, not just in business, but in social influence. But it wasn't all just showmanship. There were touching moments too. Bezos' children were present and visibly emotional. Lauren's parents gave a speech laced with stories of her childhood resilience. Friends of the couple shared inside jokes, their laughter unfiltered by decorum. The love was real, even if the layers of presentation added a sheen of mythos. So how does Meghan Markle fit into all this? She didn't. Not by invitation, and certainly not by expectation. In a room this carefully calibrated, every element was selected to enhance the image of power and cohesion. Meghan's presence was jarring precisely because it disrupted that harmony. Her arrival wasn't just uninvited. It was unaligned with the message of the event. Where Lauren had built her ascent quietly, strategically, and with loyalty, Meghan represented a chaotic form of social navigation, one marked by controversy, fractured alliances, and a seemingly insatiable hunger for attention. If the wedding was meant to serve as a showcase of those who had won the game of relevance and reputation, then Meghan's sudden insertion into that world was an unsettling reminder that not everyone accepts the rules. And it was clear from the very beginning that the organizers had not accounted for this kind of variable. Their silence during Meghan's arrival spoke volumes. Whispers spread. Phones buzzed quietly under tables. People asked each other, "Is that really her?" And when they got confirmation, the mood shifted. Not to hostility, but to confusion, disbelief, and eventually, discomfort. Because Meghan Markle wasn't just anyone. She wasn't a distant cousin or forgotten socialite. She was a global figure, one who had graced magazine covers, given primetime interviews, and lived in royal palaces. Her very presence was charged with meaning. And yet, here she was, out of place, alone, unacknowledged. Before Lauren's toast, before the now viral takedown, the tension was already building. You could see it in the sideways glances, the awkward pauses in conversation. People didn't know what to do with her. Was she welcome? Was this some kind of late surprise? Was Harry nearby? Questions filled the air, but answers never came. Meghan herself offered no clarity. She smiled. She nodded. She greeted people as if nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong, and everyone felt it. What makes this wedding so significant is not just the beauty, or the scale, or even the drama that followed. It's what it represented. It was a snapshot of a new elite, a new way of consolidating influence that required not just wealth, but image control, discretion, and relevance sustained by substance. For those on the inside, it was validation. For those on the outside, like Meghan Markle, it was a brutal reminder that influence can be temporary and access, once revoked, is nearly impossible to reclaim. It began subtly, almost too subtly for the high-powered crowd gathered in Venice that day to immediately notice. Amid the flowing gowns, tuxedos, and flashing smiles of guests who had arrived with grace and intention, a single figure stood somewhat apart, almost as if she were calculating how to belong without being noticed. Meghan Markle wasn't announced. She didn't descend from a gondola in a coordinated moment like the others. She didn't arrive at the front entrance. She wasn't even acknowledged by the event photographers, who were under strict orders to only capture confirmed guests cleared by Lauren Sanchez's personal team. But there she was, standing just beyond the orchids and polished stone columns, positioning herself as though she were simply part of the exclusive set. And yet, the moment you really looked at her, something felt off. There was no badge, no identifier, no clear path from the boat docks to her standing point. It would be hours before most of the attendees realized what had happened. But when they did, jaws clenched behind champagne flutes, and eyes darted across the room toward Lauren, who by then had begun to suspect something was wrong. Meghan's arrival at the Bezos-Sanchez wedding wasn't just unexpected, it was entirely uninvited. Multiple sources confirmed her name was not on the approved guest list. She had received no formal invitation. No digital passcode, no itinerary, no stylized wedding envelope bearing her name. Yet she had managed to walk into one of the most secure, exclusive events of the year, a billion-dollar affair surrounded by ex-military security, biometric checkpoints, and sophisticated facial recognition software used to scan arrivals. So how did she do it? According to an anonymous member of the event staff who later leaked details to the press, Meghan had arrived via a small, non-branded water taxi nearly an hour before the majority of the A-list guests began disembarking. She was alone. No Prince Harry. No personal assistant. No bodyguard. She wore oversized sunglasses, her hair styled in a sleek, polished bun. Her dress, a sleek cream-colored Valentino that managed to look both expensive and under the radar, was purposefully chosen to blend rather than stand out. She carried a minimalist clutch and held her phone in her other hand, as if she were taking casual pictures of the scenery. She looked like she belonged there, the staffer recalled. That was the scary part. She just looked like any of the other ultra-wealthy guests arriving early. Security, it turns out, was prepared for uninvited media. They were prepared for paparazzi disguised as catering staff, for rogue drones, for tech-savvy intrusions. But what they weren't prepared for was a globally famous duchess using her charm and confidence as her entry ticket. Reports suggest Meghan identified herself to a lower-level coordinator as expected and asked to be directed to the pre-ceremony lounge area. That same coordinator, perhaps overwhelmed by the pace of arrivals and flustered by her polished appearance, let her in. Within minutes, she had slipped past 2 security checkpoints and entered the grounds, merging into the pre-ceremony crowd as though she had always been part of it. This wasn't an accident. This was strategy. Meghan didn't just crash the wedding. She executed an infiltration with precision, dressed in a way that would make her presence feel familiar, even comforting. But there was one problem. Familiar doesn't mean welcome, and comfort doesn't equal consent. For a brief period, perhaps 30 minutes, she succeeded. Some guests greeted her politely, assuming she was on the list. Others avoided her entirely, unsure of the situation. Meghan floated through small conversation circles, smiling gently, laughing when appropriate, clearly trying to find her place without drawing attention to herself. The only giveaway was the stiffness in her posture. Meghan was always composed, but this was different. Observers later noted she seemed alert, too polished, and a little too eager. People began to whisper. Text messages flew silently across the venue between stylists and PR handlers. One producer reportedly leaned over to a friend and muttered, "What the hell is she doing here?" There's something particularly unsettling about watching a public figure fall out of sync with the space they're in. Meghan once held the world's attention as a symbol of modern royalty, a duchess, a wife to a prince, a humanitarian, a feminist. Her appearances were moments, events in themselves. But in Venice that day, she wasn't the focus. She wasn't even a guest. She was a presence, one that didn't belong. one that people couldn't reconcile with the rest of the narrative. And then came the moment of near collision. Meghan, holding a flute of sparkling wine handed to her by a distracted waiter, turned a corner toward the rear garden space. It was there that she reportedly came within feet of Lauren Sanchez's sister, Elena. The exchange was brief, tense, and reportedly silent. Elena did a double take, narrowed her eyes, and without saying a word, turned and walked briskly toward the interior of the venue. Within minutes, Lauren knew. What happened next remains the subject of competing narratives. Some say Lauren sent a message to security, but was told it was too late. Others claim she asked her stylist to confirm whether Meghan had somehow received a late-stage clearance. Either way, by the time the bride-to-be stepped forward to deliver her speech, just after the dinner plates had been cleared and the golden hour light cast an ethereal glow over the Venetian skyline, Lauren had already made a decision. Meghan was going to be dealt with. Not privately, not with a whisper, but with the kind of public grace-shattering honesty that only a woman supremely confident in her place could deliver. But before that moment exploded, Meghan stood quietly near the edge of the courtyard, eyes fixed on Lauren, perhaps sensing what was coming. It was one of those rare, charged silences that precede earthquakes. The room didn't quite know what was wrong, but everyone felt it. Meghan had breached something sacred, not just a wedding, but a boundary of trust, a violation of the social contract that governs elite spaces. At that point, the whispers had stopped. Eyes were locked. Phones were down. People were watching history unfold, one awkward breath at a time. And then Lauren raised the mic. Before we get there, it's important to consider the deeper question. Why? Why would Meghan Markle, a woman who has spoken often about privacy, boundaries, and being hurt by elite rejection, crash a wedding that symbolized everything she now claims to resist? Was it a cry for relevance? A last-ditch effort to remain in the circle that once embraced her? Or was it, as some have theorized, a power play gone horribly wrong? There's also the possibility that Meghan misread the moment. That she believed her past friendship with Oprah, her link to Hollywood royalty, and her global name recognition would serve as a kind of unofficial invitation. That her presence would be seen as charming, daring, or at worst, surprising. That no one would dare call her out. That Lauren would be too polite to react. She couldn't have been more wrong. What Meghan didn't seem to realize is that the power dynamics have shifted. The Hollywood elite she once dazzled is now cautious, wary, and increasingly distant. Meghan's last few public stunts, releasing private letters, suing tabloids, hinting at betrayals from every side, have eroded much of the goodwill she once commanded. This was not 2018, and Lauren Sánchez was not a passive socialite. When Lauren finally addressed the crowd, her tone was controlled, her smile thin, her voice razor-sharp. But that moment is reserved for the next section. What mattered most in the lead-up was this. Meghan came without a welcome, stood where she was not expected, and stared into a room full of people who once might have applauded her, but now only watched. And they watched because they knew. They knew what was about to happen would be remembered for years. There are moments in public life that don't simply pass. They imprint. They echo long after the cameras stop rolling and the guests go home. For Meghan Markle, what unfolded at Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's wedding wasn't just a snub. It was a definitive turning point. A humiliation so sharp, so precisely delivered, that it redefined how she would be spoken about in the social circles she had long sought to claim. The moment Lauren Sánchez, bride of the world's richest man, turned to a crowd of elites and redirected her wedding toast to deliver a verbal knockout punch to an uninvited duchess, the event transformed from a celebration of love into an international spectacle. The courtyard had grown quiet, hushed not just by the weight of the hour, but by an unspoken tension rippling through the air. Lauren had stepped up to speak. The soft glimmer of candlelight danced against the Venetian stone. The orchestra paused. All eyes turned toward her. Her speech began as expected. A loving tribute to her family. A story about her and Jeff's improbable journey, their shared dreams, their late-night conversations about space and love and legacy. She thanked guests for their presence and warmth. She acknowledged the staff and the setting and the moment. Her voice, smooth and warm, held the room in a velvet grip. But then, mid-sentence, everything shifted. Her gaze landed on a single figure at the edge of the garden. The slightest narrowing of her eyes. A deliberate pause. And then the pivot. "You know," Lauren said, adjusting her grip on the microphone, "when you plan a wedding like this, you think about every detail. Every seat, every smile, every person who belongs here. A beat. The air thickened. The crowd stiffened. And then she continued, her voice slightly cooler. Sometimes someone shows up who wasn't on the list. Someone who thinks crashing a billionaire's wedding is the same as being invited to it. But I have to say, it's bold. Gasps. Audible now. A few heads turned, sharply, toward the figure still standing silently among the white roses and gold-latticed chairs. Meghan. Lauren smiled, almost too sweetly. To that person, I just want to say, you weren't on the guest list, Duchess. Try crashing a reality show instead. It was the kind of line that doesn't need explanation. The crowd knew exactly who Lauren meant. Meghan's Netflix deal had been tabloid fodder for months. Rumors of staged docuseries, dramatized confessionals, and self-aggrandizing narratives had made her a target of ridicule even before the wedding. Lauren didn't just roast Meghan. She annihilated her image in a single line. Reducing a former royal, a woman once hailed as the future face of a modern monarchy, to a punchline. There was a moment of stunned silence. The kind of silence that weighs on a room like fog. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, came the laughter. Not joyous laughter. Not kind. This was the uncomfortable, sharp-edged laughter of a crowd that didn't know what else to do. Some clapped. Others glanced nervously around. A few even looked toward Meghan, who by then had gone completely still. Those who were closest said Meghan blinked twice. Her jaw tensed. But she did not move. She didn't smile. She didn't walk away. She stood there, holding a glass of untouched sparkling water, trapped in a storm she had walked into willingly, maybe even naively. Lauren moved on with her toast. Smoothly. Casually. She never addressed Meghan again. She spoke of love and new beginnings. She thanked Jeff for believing in her. And then she raised her glass and toasted to the future. But the damage was done. Within minutes, the story was already forming. Guests were texting loved ones. Screens lit up beneath tables. One producer, known for her work with top streaming platforms, reportedly whispered, "That was the most savage thing I've ever seen, and I once watched Joan Rivers roast an actress into therapy." The staff scrambled behind the scenes, unsure of how to react. One server spilled a bottle of rose trying to sneak a glance at Meghan. A floral assistant whispered to another, "Should we escort her out?" But no one moved. Because Meghan didn't. She stayed rooted to her spot, perhaps stunned, perhaps stubborn. There was a strange dignity in it. For all the humiliation, for all the public exposure, she didn't run. She didn't argue. She didn't make a scene. She simply existed, silent and visibly unraveling. Insiders later debated whether Meghan had been prepared for something like this. Some claimed she had been warned not to attend, that her team had advised against it. Others said she truly believed she would be welcomed, that her presence would be seen as charming, daring, even glamorous, that in her mind, she was still the woman who could shift a room's energy just by walking into it. But Lauren had made it clear. This was no longer Meghan's room. It never had been. In the hours that followed, the internet did what it always does. It exploded. Clips of Lauren's quote, retold by anonymous sources and confirmed by 3 guests with blue-check social clout, were reposted across every platform. The phrase, Duchess Crasher, began trending by midnight. Memes surfaced. Meghan photoshopped into wedding scenes from sitcoms. Meghan wearing a name tag that read, "Hi, I'm not invited." Meghan edited into the background of every major Hollywood wedding in history. The moment was memified, monetized, magnified. But it wasn't just about the joke. It was about what the joke represented. That someone of Meghan Markle's former stature could now be publicly ridiculed by a woman who had ascended in power and influence without ever claiming victimhood, without ever issuing tear-streaked interviews about being misunderstood, struck a chord. People began comparing the two women. Lauren, the confident, unapologetic partner to a man who reshaped global commerce. Meghan, the self-branded duchess who had turned a royal title into a series of media missteps. The contrast was brutal, and it resonated. Commentators began weighing in. Pundits, former royals, image consultants. This was a hard reset, one Hollywood publicist said. Meghan has long believed she could navigate between worlds, royal, celebrity, political. But this moment stripped away the illusion. She walked into a world that no longer considers her one of its own. There were defenders, of course. A few voices cried foul, accusing Lauren of bullying. That roasting someone during your wedding toast is tasteless. That whatever Meghan had done, she didn't deserve public humiliation. But those voices were drowned out by a louder, more ruthless consensus. She had asked for this. She had crossed a line. The most telling reaction came from Harry, or rather, from the absence of any reaction at all. No statement. No post. No tabloid leak suggesting he was livid or embarrassed. Just silence. A silence that spoke volumes. Insiders said he was blindsided, that he hadn't known she planned to attend, that their relationship, already fragile, had reached a breaking point. By the time the night ended, Meghan had slipped out quietly. No dramatic exit. No cameras. Just a shadow retreating into the Venetian dark, while inside, the music resumed, the laughter returned, and Lauren danced under the stars with her billionaire husband. But the moment was already sealed. It will be remembered not because of who got married, but because of who was rejected. Publicly. Permanently. And in that unforgettable moment, Lauren Sánchez didn't just defend her wedding. She delivered a message, one that echoed far beyond the canals of Venice. This is a new era. And some stories, no matter how carefully curated, no longer belong. What happened within the candlelit courtyard of a Venetian palazzo might have been confined to the privileged few in attendance, but within hours, it had turned into a cultural phenomenon. One single moment, one unscripted roast delivered by Lauren Sánchez in front of the global elite, traveled at the speed of lightning through social media. And it didn't stop there. It ignited a firestorm that exposed a tectonic shift in how the world viewed Meghan Markle, the self-styled duchess who had once captivated the globe but now found herself the center of ridicule rather than reverence. Social media didn't just react. It detonated. By the time guests were boarding water taxis back to their private residences or luxury hotels along the Grand Canal, the incident had already breached the walls of discretion. The first viral whisper didn't come from a mainstream outlet. It came from a stylist assistant, barely 24, who posted a cryptic message on her private Instagram story. When the bride stops her speech to call out a duchess, and no one comes to help her, Venice will never be the same. Within 20 minutes, the story was screen captured and posted on Twitter. 10 minutes after that, someone from the outer wedding circle confirmed what many were suspecting. Meghan Markle had attended the Bezos-Sanchez wedding uninvited and had been publicly humiliated by the bride herself. The internet did what it always does when scandal, celebrity, and unexpected confrontation collide. It twisted the story, flattened its context, and repackaged it into shareable, meme-friendly content. Screens lit up worldwide. Twitter exploded with hashtags like hashtag Duchess Crasher, hashtag Bezos Brideburn, hashtag Royal Roast, and even hashtag Meghan Uninvited. Reddit threads formed with titles like, "What was Meghan thinking?" and "Lauren Sánchez just became the Queen of Shade." By the following morning, the clip had been reenacted on TikTok hundreds of times. Influencers lip-synced Lauren's infamous line, "You weren't on the guest list, Duchess," dressed in fake wedding gowns, pointing mockingly toward imaginary outcasts. Even those who knew little about the royals or tech billionaires suddenly had an opinion, joining a global digital conversation about class, relevance, and public downfall. The memes were savage. In one, a screen grab from The Office was edited with Meghan photoshopped into the background of Jim and Pam's wedding. In another, the words "The Duchess Crasher" were emblazoned across a mock Netflix title card, parodying Meghan's own streaming deals. Someone edited the audio of Lauren's roast into footage from various award shows, turning it into a dubbed awards night moment that racked up millions of views in hours. It wasn't just a meme. It was now cultural shorthand. Even late-night talk show hosts couldn't resist. By the next taping cycle, the Meghan roast was front and center in opening monologues. One quipped, "Imagine crashing the richest man's wedding and getting roasted like marshmallows over a campfire. Only, the fire is your entire reputation." Another added, "If Meghan really wanted attention, she got it, just not the kind you can spin into a documentary." And that was the problem. Meghan had lost control of the narrative. In the past, Meghan had been able to dominate the storyline when controversy arose. A tell-all interview with Oprah here, a Netflix docuseries there. Carefully orchestrated press drops, leaks from unnamed sources, well-placed appearances. It was all part of a strategy that kept her image in flux, damaged, perhaps, but never out of her hands. But this time, the narrative didn't come from her. It came from hundreds of millions of strangers. And those strangers weren't feeling sympathetic. The most brutal aspect of the fallout wasn't the laughter, it was the indifference. Many online observers didn't even bother defending her. They simply dismissed her as desperate. She used to be a duchess, one tweet read. Now she's a party crasher with a camera crew no one invited. Another post, more cutting, read, Meghan Markle isn't misunderstood. She's just not welcome anymore. The world's moved on. The message boards and comment sections were relentless. She came to someone else's fairy tale trying to hijack the spotlight, one Redditor wrote. And Lauren did what any self-respecting queen would do, put her back in her place. But it wasn't just anonymous users fueling the fire. Blue checkmark influencers, journalists, and even public figures chimed in. A popular Hollywood producer tweeted, "Let this be a lesson. Clout chasing has an expiration date." Another influencer posted, Lauren Sánchez just did more for the American sense of etiquette than the entire British royal family ever did. The silence from Meghan's inner circle was perhaps the most telling. Oprah, Tyler Perry, Serena Williams, figures who had once stood as her defenders, offered no public commentary. No Instagram support posts. No tweets clarifying the story. Even Gayle King, who had once personally called out Meghan's critics, remained mute. In a world where public silence often implies withdrawal of support, this spoke volumes. The Archewell Foundation, Meghan and Harry's charity, released no statement. Nor did their media representatives. And that was striking. Typically, any event even loosely related to Meghan drew a carefully curated media response within hours. But in this case, there was only absence. A cold, calculated retreat. Insiders claimed that Meghan was advised not to make the situation worse by issuing a response. Any denial would only confirm her presence. Any apology would be seen as admission. And any attempt at humor would fall flat in the face of what the internet had already decided. The digital maelstrom began to seep into her commercial deals as well. By day 3, reports surfaced that a luxury skincare brand slated to collaborate with Meghan had reevaluated the timing of their campaign. An unnamed source close to the project claimed, "We're not pulling the deal, but we need the air to clear. This isn't the kind of association we wanted." That hesitation became a pattern. Meetings were postponed. One streaming executive was reportedly overheard saying, "Meghan used to be a name we whispered with anticipation. Now we're wondering if she's going to tank the room just by being in it." The Meghan Markle brand, once valued as a mix of progressive royalty and modern celebrity, had taken a beating that no PR team could fully spin. And what made it worse was that it had all happened in front of people who had once embraced her. This wasn't a British tabloid story. This wasn't a smear campaign from royal loyalists. This was Hollywood. This was Silicon Valley. This was her turf. And it wasn't just one line that broke her. It was what that line revealed. That she wasn't just uninvited from one wedding. She was being slowly uninvited from an entire echelon of power and influence. Every meme, every post, every joke retweeted by another verified celebrity. They weren't just targeting her presence in Venice. They were symbolically closing the gates on her entire relevance. The reaction wasn't just harsh. It was terminal. As the days passed and the buzz began to fade, one thing remained unshaken, the phrase that started it all. People were printing it on t-shirts. Soundbites were remixed into club beats. Social media profiles added it to their bios ironically. Even SNL writers were rumored to be working the line into the next episode's cold open. "You weren't on the guest list, Duchess." 6 words. A sentence that will likely follow Meghan Markle for years. And as for Lauren Sánchez, her following exploded. Her public approval skyrocketed. She wasn't just seen as a glamorous bride anymore. She was a cultural enforcer. A woman who had dared to say what many in those circles had quietly whispered for years. To fully grasp the gravity of what transpired in Venice, it's crucial to understand the complex and often overlooked history between Meghan Markle and Lauren Sánchez. Their paths have long been intertwined by proximity, circumstance, and the subtle, invisible wars that simmer beneath the surface of Hollywood's elite. Although the public has never seen them engage directly in a high-profile clash, until the infamous Bezos wedding roast, the undercurrents of rivalry, competition, and divergent personal narratives have been building for years. Lauren Sánchez began her career in television journalism, carving out a reputation as a polished and savvy news anchor. With a charismatic presence and a knack for storytelling, she rose steadily through the ranks of local and national news. Yet it was her pivot into aviation. Earning her helicopter pilot license and founding Black Ops Aviation, that set her apart. This move was unconventional, even bold for a woman in a male-dominated field, and it demonstrated her appetite for carving unique spaces for herself beyond traditional celebrity paths. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle was pursuing her acting career, gradually gaining attention for roles in legal dramas like Suits. Their careers, while different in direction, both involved navigating predominantly male industries with a certain elegance and fierce determination. Their social circles, however, began to overlap once Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry catapulted her into the global spotlight and Lauren's partnership with Jeff Bezos cemented her place in the billionaire echelon. Rumors and reports surfaced over the years hinting at a quiet rivalry rooted in how each woman positioned herself in the public eye. Meghan was widely regarded as the American princess, blending her Hollywood roots with royal glamour and humanitarian causes. Her narratives focused on transformation, breaking barriers, and global advocacy. Lauren, by contrast, emphasized entrepreneurship, strength in traditionally masculine domains, and a polished but assertive approach to power dynamics. One telling example of this rivalry emerged in 2021 during a charity gala in Los Angeles. Sources said both women were in attendance, occupying the same room, but keeping their distance. When a mutual acquaintance attempted to introduce them, the encounter was reportedly brief and frosty. Lauren's body language was described as guarded, her smile tight, while Meghan was calm but dismissive, as if they were two queens on different thrones acknowledging each other's presence without conceding ground. Despite this, Meghan publicly praised Lauren in earlier interviews, lauding her strength and resilience, and hinting at a supportive bond that defied the headlines. Lauren, for her part, spoke respectfully of Meghan's ability to navigate intense media scrutiny, noting in one interview, "It takes a special kind of courage to live under that kind of spotlight." But the facade of mutual respect belied deeper tensions. Industry insiders suggested that both women viewed each other through the prism of competition for influence over shared social and philanthropic circles. Meghan's rapid ascent to global recognition, amplified by the British monarchy's historical weight, was seen by some as a direct threat to Lauren's steadily rising star in elite American society. Conversely, Lauren's association with Bezos and her positioning as a tech titan's consort appeared to overshadow Meghan's increasingly embattled brand. Another dimension of their relationship was the media's framing. Tabloid and entertainment outlets often juxtaposed them as archetypes. Meghan as the former royal with Hollywood aspirations, Lauren as the self-made woman who earned her place without royal titles. These narratives sometimes pitted them against one another, highlighting their differences in age, background, and style. Public perception of Meghan often cast her as controversial and polarizing, while Lauren was increasingly viewed as a stabilizing force behind Bezos's public image. This contrast further deepened the divide. For Lauren, maintaining control over her narrative was paramount, especially after her highly publicized relationship with Bezos became a focal point for gossip and speculation. For Meghan, whose public image had undergone multiple reinventions, the stakes were equally high but more volatile. Perhaps most significantly, their approaches to privacy and publicity diverged sharply. Meghan embraced the spotlight, often inviting cameras into her life through documentaries and media appearances. Lauren, while no stranger to the media, cultivated an aura of exclusivity and discretion, granting interviews sparingly and carefully managing her public persona. The difference in these strategies may have contributed to the tension that exploded in Venice. Lauren's public call-out of Meghan wasn't just about an uninvited guest at a wedding. It was a repudiation of Meghan's perceived attempts to insert herself into spaces where she was no longer, or perhaps never was, truly welcomed. Moreover, the stakes for Lauren were personal as well as social. Hosting a wedding of such magnitude and exclusivity was a statement of her success and place within a select echelon. Meghan's presence threatened that statement. It called into question the integrity of Lauren's carefully curated event and challenged her authority as the bride. For Meghan, crashing the wedding may have been an act of reclaiming agency or making a statement about her continued relevance. But given the history between the two women, it was also a miscalculation, one that underestimated Lauren's readiness to defend her position publicly and without mercy. In this light, the roast becomes more than a viral moment. It is the culmination of years of parallel yet intersecting journeys, two women navigating power, fame, and identity in a world that scrutinizes them endlessly. Their public encounter in Venice was the inevitable clash of these forces. Understanding this history is key to appreciating why Lauren's words carried such weight and why Meghan's response, or lack thereof, has defined the fallout. It was not just about a wedding guest list. It was about territory, respect, and survival in a cutthroat arena. In the days following the infamous roast at the Bezos-Sanchez wedding, Hollywood's glittering ecosystem found itself abuzz with conversations and quiet reckonings. The incident wasn't just fodder for social media memes and late-night jokes. It rippled through the very fabric of the industry's inner circles, affecting relationships, reputations, and alliances that had seemed unshakable just weeks before. Hollywood is a world where appearances matter, but so do alliances. It thrives on the interplay of public personas and private loyalties, where a whispered word can open doors or slam them shut forever. Meghan Markle, who once basked in the golden glow of celebrity favor, suddenly found herself navigating an atmosphere thick with unspoken judgments and cautious glances. One of the first signs of shifting tides was the subtle but telling behavior of A-list friends and collaborators. Industry insiders noticed that many high-profile figures who had once been seen publicly supporting Meghan began to distance themselves in the wake of the wedding incident. Invitations to private dinners, film premieres, and exclusive galas reportedly dwindled. Agents and publicists advised their clients to tread carefully around conversations about Meghan, signaling an unofficial cooling of relations. At an exclusive industry dinner in Los Angeles, a well-known producer who had previously championed Meghan's transition from royal to streaming powerhouse was overheard cautioning a young actor, "It's complicated now. People want to avoid drama, and Meghan is, well, let's just say she's not the safe bet she used to be." The comment wasn't mean-spirited, it was pragmatic, reflecting the delicate balancing act many in Hollywood were now performing. Social media further amplified these ripples. Celebrities known for publicly endorsing Meghan either fell silent or issued carefully worded posts that avoided direct mention of her. A notable example was a popular talk show host who had once hailed Meghan as a trailblazer, but, after the wedding roast went viral, chose to focus their segments on unrelated charitable causes rather than engage with any Meghan-related narratives. Moreover, some stars engaged in what industry observers called subtle signaling. Unfollows on Instagram, deleted photos featuring Meghan, and the absence of any mentions during acceptance speeches or interviews sent unmistakable messages. The nuances of these social media moves were not lost on those in the know. A top-tier publicist told a reporter, "In Hollywood, an unfollow is a statement as loud as a public feud." Yet it wasn't just about social media etiquette. Behind closed doors, many in Hollywood reportedly expressed mixed feelings about the incident itself. Some sympathized with Meghan's evident humiliation, viewing Lauren's roast as harsh and unnecessary. Others, however, believed the moment was a long-overdue reality check, a reminder that the kingdom Meghan once entered was no longer hers to claim at will. A few influential figures, whose names remain confidential, allegedly expressed frustration with Meghan's media tactics. One insider commented, "There's a difference between controlling your narrative and being the narrative's captive. Meghan has blurred those lines, and people are tired." This sentiment, while not universally held, reflected a growing weariness with the controversies surrounding the former Duchess. Meanwhile, Tyler Perry, who had often served as a protector and mentor to Meghan during her tumultuous royal exit, reportedly chose silence during this period. Sources close to Perry suggested he was disappointed but cautious, aware that weighing in publicly could either exacerbate tensions or alienate his own vast network of connections. Public relations strategists in Hollywood also began advising clients to distance themselves tactically. A senior PR consultant explained, "When a figure becomes polarizing, the safest move for celebrities is to remain neutral or quietly step back. This preserves their own brand equity without seeming disloyal." For many, this meant that even long-standing friendships with Meghan were quietly reevaluated. The entertainment industry's response was emblematic of a larger dynamic in celebrity culture: the rapid rise and fall of public favor. Meghan's ascent had been meteoric, fueled by the romance of royalty and a savvy media presence. But her fall, hastened by high-profile missteps and a string of controversies, illustrated the fragility of celebrity status in an age of relentless scrutiny. Interestingly, some actors and producers took a more nuanced view. A celebrated actress with a history of advocating for women in the industry remarked privately, "We all have moments when we overreach or misjudge." Meghan's situation is complicated by the intersection of race, gender, and power. But that doesn't excuse public shaming. Her words captured the duality of public opinion, a mix of empathy and critique. At the same time, Hollywood's collective memory of Meghan's earlier charm offensive remained vivid. Many remembered her poised speeches at charity events, her advocacy for mental health, and her efforts to spotlight underrepresented voices. That foundation of goodwill, however, seemed to erode rapidly as the Venice incident shifted the narrative toward questions of entitlement and social miscalculation. The buzz even reached Hollywood's elite parties, where whispered conversations often turned to speculation about Meghan's next moves. Would she retreat further from the spotlight, double down on her streaming deals, seek reconciliation with former allies? The answers were uncertain, but the consensus was clear. Meghan had entered a new phase of her public life, one defined more by survival than by triumph. In the broader cultural context, this Hollywood response mirrored similar sentiments within political and philanthropic circles. The consensus was that Meghan Markle's aura of invincibility had been punctured, and that the world was watching to see if she could rebuild or if this would be her final public misstep. As the social distances grew and the whispers turned into quiet exclusions, Meghan found herself navigating a landscape far less forgiving than the one she had once dominated. In Hollywood's relentless spotlight, relevance is both a currency and a weapon, and the incident in Venice had, for many, bankrupted her standing. To understand Meghan Markle's decision to attend Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's wedding uninvited, and to appreciate the profound miscalculation that followed, it's essential to delve into her mindset and the history that shaped her expectations of elite social dynamics. Meghan's journey, both personal and public, has been marked by a complex relationship with power, attention, and relevance. Her actions in Venice were not merely impulsive. They were informed by years of navigating spaces where boundaries often blur, and where the rules of access are as much about perception as about invitation. Meghan's rise from actress to duchess to global media figure was fueled by a rare combination of ambition, media savvy, and a cultivated image of empathy and resilience. From the earliest days of her relationship with Prince Harry, she was positioned as a transformative figure, someone who could bridge the worlds of Hollywood glamour and royal tradition. This dual identity gave her unprecedented access to circles that traditionally had strict gatekeeping mechanisms. Invitations flowed, doors opened, and the world watched as Meghan redefined what it meant to be a modern royal. Alongside this ascent was a steady accumulation of influence outside the palace walls. Her Netflix deals, her philanthropic ventures, and her high-profile friendships created an ecosystem where her name carried significant weight. For a time, Meghan could seemingly transcend the traditional social hierarchies that govern elite gatherings. She was no longer just an invited guest. She became a symbol, a brand, a cause. This elevated status likely fostered a sense of entitlement, or at least a belief that traditional social barriers could be circumvented. Meghan's public statements and media appearances often emphasize themes of inclusion, boundary breaking, and challenging outdated systems. She positioned herself as a disruptor, someone who did not need the approval of established elites to command attention. Yet, this approach has inherent contradictions. While challenging boundaries can be empowering, it can also alienate gatekeepers who view such moves as transgressions. Meghan's repeated public confrontations with the press, her lawsuits against tabloids, and her assertive media strategies may have burned bridges with many in the very communities she once courted. As her exclusivity diminished, so did her social capital within these circles. Her prior successes and bending social norms might have reinforced the belief that she could get away with entering the Bezos-Sanchez wedding uninvited. After all, if she had navigated the transition from Hollywood to royalty and secured lucrative media deals in the face of skepticism, why wouldn't a private wedding, no matter how exclusive, allow some flexibility? Moreover, Meghan's pattern of media engagement had often rewarded audacity. Controversial statements sparked interviews, leaked stories generated sympathy or outrage. Bold moves kept her in headlines and, by extension, in the cultural conversation. This cycle likely contributed to a sense that visibility, any visibility, was valuable, regardless of context. It's also possible that Meghan misread the nature of the event itself. Unlike public ceremonies or widely attended galas, private weddings demand a level of decorum and exclusivity that defies celebrity norms. The Bezos-Sanchez wedding was as much a statement of social power as it was a celebration of love. Attendance wasn't just about showing up. It was about reinforcing alliances and mutual respect within a tightly knit elite. Meghan's history suggests she may have underestimated this aspect. Her public persona often emphasizes openness and breaking down barriers, but such ideals clash with the rigid gatekeeping typical of billionaire social events. This misalignment between Meghan's worldview and the reality of elite social protocols created fertile ground for missteps. Her decision might also have been influenced by a desire to reclaim narrative control. Having faced years of hostile media coverage and fractured relationships with the royal family, Meghan may have sought to reassert herself by appearing at a high-profile event that symbolized power and success. Attending the wedding could have been perceived as a bold statement of relevance and resilience. Furthermore, Meghan's known connections to Hollywood celebrities and media moguls may have led her to believe that the wedding's guest list was more fluid than it actually was. Given the presence of numerous A-listers and media figures, she might have assumed that her name was on the periphery or that informal invitations could be extended. This assumption, however, was a costly error. Psychologically, Meghan's trajectory is emblematic of a woman grappling with the loss of traditional structures and the attempt to forge new paths through uncharted territory. The royal exit, the media battles, and the transition to independent celebrity all represent seismic shifts. In such a volatile context, boundaries become blurred and the risk of misjudgment rises. In social psychology terms, Meghan may have been exhibiting what's known as social identity threat, a state where individuals feel their belonging to a group is jeopardized, prompting them to assert inclusion sometimes through risky behaviors. Crashing a wedding might, from this lens, be interpreted as an attempt to reaffirm identity and status in a domain slipping from grasp. The consequences of this misjudgment were amplified by the public nature of the event and the sharpness of Lauren Sanchez's response. Meghan's failure to anticipate such a direct and public rebuke underscores a disconnect between her self-perception and the reality of her standing among elite peers. Her media team, reportedly scrambling behind the scenes, was caught off guard by the virality and intensity of the backlash. Damage control efforts focused on minimizing exposure and preventing further leaks, but the moment had already etched itself into public memory. Ultimately, Meghan's belief that she could get away with crashing the wedding was rooted in a complex interplay of ambition, past successes, shifting social capital, and psychological needs. It was a gamble, a high-stakes attempt to assert presence and power in a world that had increasingly signaled her exclusion. This gamble, however, failed spectacularly. At Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's ultra-exclusive Venice wedding, Meghan Markle appeared uninvited and got called out in front of the world. Lauren Sánchez stopped mid-toast, silenced the music, and delivered a savage line. "You weren't on the guest list, Duchess. Try crashing a reality show instead." The crowd gasped, then erupted into uncomfortable laughter. Today, we're diving deep into how Meghan crashed one of the most guarded events of the year, the fallout from Lauren's brutal takedown, and what this means for Meghan's fragile public image. Stick around, the story behind this unexpected showdown will shock you.